Hi, this is Renaud Anjoran from Sofeast. We've been supporting a lot of companies that develop their own products, new products from scratch, as they go through the new product introduction process from product development all the way to mass production to reduce their risks. So let me explain to you what we do and how it works. What do we do in a quality assurance program to support your new product introduction? First, a brief slide about myself. I've been working for nearly 20 years now in the China manufacturing industry, mostly on the manufacturing quality side, as well as product reliability. The Sofeast group was founded in 2006, has been providing quality assurance services from the start. We also have a supply chain management activity, a product development activity, and a lab, mostly for product reliability and performance testing. We also manage some manufacturing activities, some of them in-house. Okay, and really the mission, as you can see here, is transparency and control in our client's supply chain. Okay, so the good news is that there is a proven process for what they call new product introduction. And here really I'm going to focus mostly on electrical, electronic, and mechanical products. All right. So we typically start to get involved around here when product development has been going on. You're getting closer, let's say, to a final prototype, or maybe you already passed that. You already made some tooling. Maybe the product design has already been frozen. All right. But then there's actually quite a few things to get right here on the way to ramp up on mass production. Okay, and execution is extremely important. And that's really where we need to be involved to keep an eye on what the suppliers are doing, to bring some structure and some method. All right. So if the product itself has not been validated, okay, the product design is not yet fully approved, we can review it. Typically, DFM stands for Design for Manufacturing. So review the product. Our R&D engineers have some checklists, 90 points looking at the electrical and electronic design. Okay, and we put that in a PowerPoint document telling you, okay, this, maybe we suggest you change this. Okay, otherwise you're going to have this kind of problem or this kind of risk. All right. Also very important to provide clarity on the quality standard. Okay, so have you already documented your visual quality standard? Have you already documented a function test, etc., etc.? Okay, so we help review that. We help point to potential issues, potential misunderstandings. Maybe certain points are not very clear, not very specific. All right, and we try to take your priorities into account. Okay, it's not the same for every project. Product compliance, if you don't already have a plan for that, not only what to test, but also what information do you need to collect for the critical components, what to collect for your technical documentation, etc., etc. Okay, so we research applicable standards, we suggest a test plan, we can get quotes from a lab, we can manage the process, and in case there are issues, we can look into it and try to understand. And again, coming back to product design validation, we can also do some pre-testing with usually a cheaper local lab so that they run the same tests, or at least some of the same tests, depending on the highest priority, right, as the final certification testing. Very important, very good to find the failures before you have completed the design, right? Before maybe you have to go into tooling revisions and so on and so forth. You might lose a lot of time. So it's good to do some pre-testing. Okay, we talk about compliance. Let's also talk about reliability. So we have our own lab. We have a very experienced product reliability engineer. Okay, so we can create a custom reliability test plan. Okay, the reliability, durability. Basically, you don't want your product to fail too early in the hands of the users or in the field or wherever it's used. Okay, and the plan might be different during product development, again, to really validate the product design. It's going to be more of a full plan versus in DVT, PVT, mass production, or whatever you call it, let's say later in a new product introduction process where it might be less of an accelerated or highly accelerated plan. It might be more of a live test plan, just replicating the expected stresses in the life of the product, expected use, expected conditions, etc. Okay, and then it becomes ongoing reliability testing to be done on every mass production batch, typically. Very, very useful. Okay, and there's no such thing as a standard reliability test plan, unfortunately, right? So we always need to come back to come from the product itself. How is it going to be used? What are the functions? What environment, etc. Some of them very, very typical, okay, but some of them after that lower down are much more specific to the exact application and so on. Okay, in a nutshell, these are some of the very, very common types of reliability tests. But as I mentioned, we have to start from the product itself, the expected stresses, etc. And there's usually some highly customized test cases. Okay, and just to give again an idea, this is sort of a rundown of some of the most common types of reliability tests. Now, in case of failure, right, you really need to understand why and how it failed so we can do, if necessary, very highly structured failure analysis jobs. We can take photos in very slow motion. We can do a lot of things to really understand how it failed, because this is very important, right, to be fed back to the designers. Okay, now let's switch to supply chain, right? So you might already have picked some suppliers for the critical components, maybe for a lot of different components, standard off the shelf, custom design, etc. Okay, they might be good for making prototypes, 5 parts, 10 parts. Are they going to be good for making 10,000 parts, right? For really going into mass production? If you pick a supplier that does not have relatively mature systems and processes, you can really get into trouble. Okay, so we can do a variety of factory audits, the most common types of factory audits. So the first three are, let's say, systems and process, sort of on the quality side, okay, and then can be about social compliance, can be about environmental systems, and so on. These are really most of the more than 98% of what we do. Okay, if it's a relatively small factory, you need to go very deep into the details. Bigger factory, maybe with some systems in place. Okay, let's go into that a little bit more in the details. And then if it's really a factory that is going to make a critical product, and it's very important that they have good, mature process controls, we can do a process management audit. We have specialized checklists for PCBA, die casting, plastic injection molding, etc., etc. The let's say the common ones that come back 80% of the time. Okay, this is not just for the assembly supplier. Okay, I repeat, it should be for also for some of the critical suppliers. Okay, so might involve battery suppliers, maybe certainly enclosure suppliers. It could be anything. If you go into really high volumes, safety is very important. Maybe even the power supply unit, maybe the display, PCBA, very common, etc., etc. Okay. This is just an example for plastic injection molding. So typically, this is just one of the topics about material processing. And then, for example, for color concentrate ratio, okay, well, the material handler does not record the data, does not use a scale, it's very rough. Okay, so you might have an issue with colors, right? How do they mix? No tumbler, okay. Regrind percentage. Now this is very, very important for reliability, for safety, and simply for user experience. Okay, so no tight control. Okay, no documentation, nothing, no guidelines. Okay, that's really sort of a risk. Okay, so this really helps you understand. Okay, are you dealing with like a maturity level 1, 2, 3, 4 type of supplier? Okay, and it really helps you put the finger on the risks, because once you know the risks, then you know also where you need more control. Okay, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Before production starts, there are some very important, very useful types of process improvement tools, let's say, okay, and analysis and tools. The most common ones, the most useful ones, I think, when you have a product, the design is frozen or close to be frozen, you're already planning for how to go into production, whatever, make the tooling, go into small pilot runs, and then ramp up, etc. Process FMEA, very important. So it is a risk analysis and control plan. Then is really, okay, what are the controls that we really need to have in place? Okay, and this typically we run it as workshops. Most of the time, the workshops are 2.5 hours in the morning, pulling together various people. It's very important to have different perspectives. And then in the afternoon, let them collect some data, let them go do some of the work. We can't really usually pull them into a meeting room for a long time, but we keep supporting them basically. Okay, I mentioned so PFMEA, process FMEA, okay? In contrast with another very common, very, very useful also risk analysis is the design FMEA. Okay, design FMEA is very important, usually comes earlier. So what are the failure modes? Let's think of what could go wrong, and then let's try to put some estimated grades on severity, likelihood of occurrence, and how easy it would be to detect. Then we multiply the three. We have a composite risk ratio, RPN number, and we can prioritize, and we can spend more time on the highest risk failure modes. Okay, now control plan, also a very, very important tool. Okay, so this usually is put in place starting with the process of MEA, because we know what the risks are and what to control and so on. And really it breaks down all the process steps and really, okay, what is it, how is it going to be done, and then is it product or process, etc. Okay, how critical is it, and what's the documents that actually explain, that are going to guide the people. Maybe it's assembly work instruction, maybe it's a inspection checklist, whatever, right? How is it going to be checked? What's the sampling or the frequency and the frequency of control? And then if something goes wrong, what is the proper response, right? Once you have a relatively good and mature control plan, the factories can develop their inspection checklists, their work instructions, etc., and make sure they don't miss any of these important control points. Okay. We also look at the deliverables of the new product introduction. So you work with your supplier, and your supplier should prepare things, and also maybe your design firm or your designers in-house. There's a lot of things that they should prepare, a lot of documents. Okay, so this is what we call the deliverables of NPI. A lot of them are in the form of documents. Some of them are maybe like a plan for a test station, a soldering jig, an assembly fixture, etc. Right, so we can help look into that and comment on that. So you see if they are ready and how ready they are to go into the preparation pilot runs, and then after that ramp up into mass production. Another very important thing that we do is we go to the factory before they start with the pilot run, let's say the short manufacturing batch that they're going to do first before going into higher volume production. Okay, and there's a number of things we need to check to make sure the setup is right. And I summarize things here. The assembly line, the material delivery to the line, the general management and the planning and so on, but also how are they going to do, or how are they actually doing incoming QC? Okay, this is before they assemble things, right? And then we can observe how they actually do in process control and outgoing control, quality control. And we can do our own inspections also at the end of this. Okay, and very often what we do is what we call a first article inspection. Is basically we have the outgoing QC checklist and the test plan and so on and so forth. And we actually take the first few pieces that come out and we test them very carefully. Okay. And this is very, very useful in catching the issues and feeding these issues back to the upstream process and finding where they come from so that the people in the manufacturing place can actually do something about that. Okay. There's other things we can do, of course. Let's say they go into ramp up the first order, the second order. It's very important to keep an eye on what they're doing, right? So we do inspections during production typically. And again, this is not just on the assembly factory, right? It should also be, depending on the risks that we estimated, that we detected during the factory audits, also in maybe one or two or three of the critical suppliers manufacturing operations. Okay. And again, the idea is to flag the issues early so that it can be fed back to the right people and corrective actions can be taken for the future, and corrections like rework, repair, whatever, scrap maybe, needs to be done on what they have already made. Okay, and these are some examples, maybe on PCB assembly. There's some points that are relatively frequent, and then we kind of know what to look for. Okay, this is on a sensor, so sometimes it's really purely visual. Things really come out. It's relatively easy to catch them. Sometimes we do a mold tear down to really make sure. Well, sometimes there's some funny stories with molds, let's say. Okay, so it's good to have a look. And also we can follow up closely on the first trials. Okay, and then end of the line, sort of out of box inspections here that we call final random inspections. It also includes the labeling, the packing. So sometimes we find a lot of issues on packing and labeling. All right. And also, this is really the time to have an idea about the average quality level of the batch. So in this case, it's pretty bad. There's a lot of minor defects. Okay. It's just an example. And we can really, again, at that point, we are used to, okay, what are the test stations? Do they actually work correctly? Let's try it with some bad samples, some good samples. Let's feedback, and maybe if there's some mechanisms to actually link it to maybe the customer's database and server. Are there any internet issues? What is slowing things down? What could we do about that, etc., etc. Usually a lot of things to work on. This is a big topic, test stations. Okay, I was talking about final random inspection. So this is the usual sort of AQL tables. Everybody calls them like that in industry. So based on a certain lot size, and usually starting level 2, you pick a letter, and based on that letter, you know how many samples to pick randomly. And then based on the acceptance quality limits, okay, the AQL limits, if they are kind of loose, it could be 2.5 and 4. Okay, it could be tighter. This is something we can advise you on earlier. This is not something to set at the last moment, just before the inspection, obviously. Okay. We also have a mobile application. So when things are a little bit mature, we also need to work on our efficiency and the speed at which the inspection report can be reviewed. Okay, this is the mobile application name. And we have done typically some factory audits. We have identified some gaps, okay, and by the way, we can follow up with the supplier right away to see how they can address and close these gaps, right? But we have some gaps. We review maybe the NPI deliverables. We do some production readiness reviews. We do some inspections. We find so issues on the factory systems and processes. and on the products, and maybe on the testing process, etc. All of that goes into an issue tracker. Okay, it's a very important document. Okay, and the supplier should have access to it and be prompted to write comments, and if it's big topic, maybe root causes. Okay, it usually looks like this, and we have a list of the issues, and we track. Hopefully they get closed, all of them at some point, and then there's some comments and countermeasures, etc. Okay, and it's good to have an overview of all of these issues collected over time. Okay, we really use the tracker to keep the list of issues, especially the big issues, right in front of the face of the people who manage the suppliers and the factories. Okay, it's very important to keep pressure on them and to drive action. Okay, and for more complex problems, usually we send an engineer. Could be in one day. Sometimes it's like 5, 6, 7 sessions over 3 months. Okay, there is a really highly structured methodology, I would say. This is just, you see, D0, D1, D2, but this goes into also immediate containment and understanding of where it comes from and root cause analysis. And then we have to break it down if it's actually 2 or 3 different problems in different ADs, actually. And then what are the logical countermeasures? Who's going to do what? How to make sure it's going to be effective, and then come back at some point to actually confirm effectiveness. And can we close it? Were the key documents updated, and so on and so forth. Okay, now this is a whole quality assurance program. This is my last slide. Okay, how to keep the program alive, how to keep it moving. Okay, somebody needs to keep talking with the suppliers and the client, and keep everything in the tracker document, and keep really a view over, okay, are we missing something, right? So this is where one of our English-speaking project managers come into the picture. She's the central point of contact for client and the key supplier. Okay, very hard to give a budget for that. It depends obviously on the complexity of the project, on also the maturity of the suppliers, and what do we do, and do we need also to develop a backup supply chain in case the first suppliers that were selected are not performing as expected. Okay, very hard to see, but we have a lot of information on our website, and you can see the pricing there. But really the idea is that we have different departments in the group, and we pull the expertise. Okay, oh, we need quality engineering here, we need reliability knowledge here, and we need compliance, and we need maybe for DFM, maybe, oh, we need a mechanical engineer or an electronic engineer. Oh, and we need, okay, different things, maybe sourcing person, and quality auditors, and just inspectors, etc. So typically on one of these programs, it can involve a dozen people easily in our group. Okay, so that's why some people like to hire one person and say, okay, you're going to manage everything, but that one person is going to fall short on some of these tasks. It's nearly guaranteed. Okay, and that's it. So I hope this was clear and useful. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. Thanks.